before we blast off, say hi in the comments. It may seem small, but it helps the algorithm beam this out to more sci-fi fans. And I seriously love seeing who's part of the crew.
So that's how humanity accidentally shattered a 12,000-year-old system of galactic governance, I said, leaning back in my chair. Not with some grand military campaign or technological breakthrough, but with a single administrative filing error. The alien journalists' sensory appendages quivered in what I'd come to recognize as their species' version of disbelief. Jack Marshall, the translator device, warbled in its synthetic voice. You expect me to believe your species brought down the galactic order because someone filled out the wrong form? I smiled. That's always the reaction I get. Nobody wants to believe that the most stable political structure in known space collapsed because a human clerk didn't read the fine print. If you want the full story, I said, we'll need to go back about 3 years. Trust me, it's worth it. The galactic order wasn't actually all that old. Cosmically speaking, 12,000 years sounds impressive until you consider that some member species had been spacefaring for millions of years before deciding to play nice together. What made the order special wasn't its age, but its stability. No small feat when you're trying to govern 47 different sentient species spread across 18,219 star systems. The order maintained peace through an impossibly complex system of treaties, trade agreements, cultural exchange programs, and what humans would call red tape. Lots and lots of red tape. The bureaucracy was so dense that it actually worked as a peacekeeping mechanism. By the time you navigated the proper channels to declare war on someone, the original conflict was ancient history. Humans were the new kids on the galactic block. We'd only achieved faster-than-light travel 50 years earlier, and our admission to the Order was still considered controversial in some circles. Many elder species viewed us as primitive, volatile, and dangerous. Cosmic toddlers with nuclear matches, as one particularly poetic Xanthi diplomat put it. The Order operated on 7 core principles, but the most important was the principle of evolutionary sovereignty. Each species was allowed to develop according to its own cultural and biological imperatives without interference. This created a patchwork system where some territories operated under democratic principles, while others maintained strictly hierarchical societies. The Order didn't care how you governed yourself as long as you played by the interspecies rules. I was working as a cultural liaison officer on Nexus Station when humanity managed to break everything. Nexus was a massive orbital habitat where representatives from all 47 species could meet on neutral ground. Think of it as the United Units, but with way better food courts and significantly more tentacles. My job was to explain humanity to aliens and explain aliens to humanity, a task roughly equivalent to translating Shakespeare into interpretive dance while blindfolded, but I loved it. Every day brought new challenges, new misunderstandings to resolve, new opportunities to build bridges between wildly different forms of consciousness. That particular day started like any other. I was in my office reviewing trade proposals when my assistant Marcus burst through the door without knocking. "Jack, you need to see this," he said, waving a data tablet frantically. "Tucker Reynolds just got elected as Earth's representative to the Galactic Council." I nearly choked on my coffee. Tucker Reynolds? The real estate developer? That's impossible. It's all over the feeds. The Assembly voted him in this morning. For context, Earth's representative to the Council was typically a seasoned diplomat with decades of interspecies relations experience. Reynolds was a billionaire businessman with zero diplomatic background who'd campaigned on the slogan "Make Humanity Great for Once." I pulled up the news on my own tablet. Sure enough, there was Reynolds giving his acceptance speech, all perfect teeth and practiced charisma. "The problem with our place in the galaxy," he was saying, "is that we've been playing by everyone else's rules. Rules designed to keep humanity contained, restricted, limited. It's time we started making some rules of our own." Marcus and I exchanged worried glances. "This is going to be a diplomatic nightmare," I muttered. "The Tholians already think we're too aggressive, and the Viridian Concordat barely tolerates our presence in their trade routes." "Maybe it won't be so bad," Marcus offered without conviction. "The Council's powers are pretty limited, right?" "By design, yes, but there are loopholes. There are always loopholes." Reynolds arrived on Nexus Station 2 weeks later with an entourage of advisors, security personnel, and what appeared to be a personal barista. His first official act was to decline the traditional welcome ceremony, citing a busy schedule, a snub that the protocol-obsessed Draxian representatives wouldn't soon forget. I was assigned as his cultural guide, a role that quickly devolved into damage control. Reynolds approached galactic politics like a hostile takeover, looking for weaknesses to exploit rather than common ground to build upon. "Walk me through these trade restrictions again," he said during one of our briefings. We were in his expansive suite, which he'd had remodeled to resemble an Earth-style executive office, complete with genuine leather furniture that made several photosynthetic species deeply uncomfortable. "It's not exactly a restriction," I explained for what felt like the 100th time. "The Quantum Resource Allocation Treaty ensures equitable distribution of rare elements. Earth receives its proportional share based on population." "Our proportional share is garbage," Reynolds interrupted. "We could be mining twice as much tachyon ore if these regulations weren't holding us back." "Yes, but those regulations prevent resource wars and ecological collapse on developing worlds. The whole system is carefully balanced." "Balance?" he scoffed. "That's what people say when they're afraid to compete. Do the Xanthi limit their antimatter production? Do the Viridians cap their biotech exports?" "Actually, yes. Every species operates under the same framework of—" "Save it, Marshall." Reynolds waved dismissively. "I didn't get where I am by accepting the status quo. There's always an angle, always a way to renegotiate terms. I wanted to explain that the orders agreements weren't like business contracts you could simply renegotiate when convenient. They were the result of millennia of careful diplomacy, countless compromises made to accommodate fundamentally different biological imperatives and cultural values. Instead, I said, just please consult with me before you make any formal proposals to the Council. Some concepts don't translate well across species boundaries." Reynolds smiled in a way that didn't reach his eyes. "Sure thing, Jack. We're on the same team after all." We weren't, though. Not really. Reynolds saw the galaxy as a marketplace where humanity needed to maximize its advantages. I saw it as a community where we were still proving we belonged. 3 days later, Reynolds submitted his first official proposal to the Council without telling me. I found out when my communicator exploded with urgent messages from 6 different species representatives, all demanding explanation. The proposal itself seemed innocuous enough, a simple request to reclassify Earth's developmental status from early interstellar to established spacefaring civilization. On the surface, it was just a bureaucratic designation change, but in reality, it would fundamentally alter humanity's rights and responsibilities within the Order. I rushed to Reynolds' chamber, bypassing his increasingly annoyed security detail. "What were you thinking?" I demanded. "Do you have any idea what you've just done?" Reynolds was lounging on a sofa, reviewing something on a holographic display. "I've begun the process of getting humanity the respect it deserves," he said calmly. "Our technology has advanced beyond most early interstellar civilizations. The classification is holding us back." "The classification isn't just about technology. It's about cultural stability, diplomatic infrastructure, demonstrated long-term thinking. We've barely had FTL travel for half a century, and in that time, we've expanded faster than any species in the Order's history," Reynolds countered. "We're not some primitive culture needing protection anymore, Jack." That's exactly how this looks to the Council, like we're refusing the guidance of more experienced species. The Archivist Collective spent 6 centuries as early interstellar. The Archivists are glorified librarians with a spaceship fetish, Reynolds said. Humanity is different. We're exceptional. I closed my eyes and counted to 10. "Please tell me you at least filed Form 6090B with your proposal." Reynolds frowned. "What's Form 60? "The Declaration of Cultural Context for Status Reclassification," I said with growing dread. "It's mandatory for all administrative changes that affect diplomatic standing." "My staff handled the paperwork," Reynolds said, unconcerned. "I'm sure they covered everything important." They hadn't, of course. In their rush to implement Reynolds' vision, his team had skipped what they saw as redundant bureaucratic formalities. What they didn't understand was that those formalities were the glue holding the entire system together. Form 6090B wasn't just paperwork, it was a formal acknowledgement that the requesting species understood the full implications of their changed status, including the nullification of certain protections and the activation of dormant treaty obligations. Without that acknowledgement, Reynolds' request triggered an obscure clause in the Order's founding documents. the Autonomy Assertion Protocol. This protocol dated back to the Order's earliest days, when less advanced species needed protection from exploitative trade practices. In essence, it stated that any civilization rejecting its developmental classification without proper documentation was declaring complete autonomy from all Order regulations. In other words, humanity had just declared itself exempt from every treaty, trade agreement, and interspecies law that comprised the Galactic Order. It took 3 days for the implications to ripple through the bureaucratic layers of the Council. By the time anyone understood what had happened, markets were already crashing across 17 star systems. The Viridian Concordat had recalled its ambassadors, the Tholian hegemony had mobilized its border fleets, and Tucker Reynolds, completely oblivious to the chaos he'd unleashed, was planning his next proposal to optimize humanity's galactic footprint. The day humans broke the Galactic Order didn't end with explosions or declarations of war. It ended with me staring out a viewport at the swirling lights of Nexus Station, watching diplomats from a dozen worlds hurrying to emergency sessions, wondering if anyone could put this particular genie back in its bottle. Spoiler alert, they couldn't. And that was just the beginning. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was called to order with a sound that human ears couldn't properly process. Something between a gong, a whale song, and quantum static. I watched from the observer's gallery as representatives from 47 species filed into the grand chamber of Nexus Station. The council chamber was designed to accommodate beings of wildly different physiologies, environmental needs, and sensory capabilities. The Methane Coalition delegates floated in pressurized bubbles. The crystalline quarry pulsed with internal light. The hive-connected Vespari moved as a synchronized unit of 37 bodies sharing one consciousness. And there, looking utterly pleased with himself, sat Tucker Reynolds in the human delegation's chair, a position that had previously been filled by career diplomats who understood the value of speaking last and saying little. The Archon, an ancient being from one of the founding species of the Order, addressed the assembly. Its translated voice resonated through the neural interfaces every attendee wore. "We face an unprecedented situation," the Archon said. "For the first time in 8,763 standard cycles, a member species has invoked the Autonomy Assertion Protocol without proper declaration of intent. The implications are significant." That was diplomatic understatement at its finest. Significant was like calling a supernova a bit warm. The reactions from the various delegations came swiftly and predictably aligned with their existing views on humanity. The Viridian Concordat's speaker rose first, its gill-like respiratory organs fluttering with agitation. "This is precisely the scenario we warned about when Earth was granted provisional membership. Humans do not comprehend the delicate balance of interspecies governance. They act without understanding the consequences." Several delegations signaled agreement through the neural interface, mainly those from the older, more established civilizations who'd been reluctant to admit humanity in the first place. The Tholian representative's metallic voice cut through the murmurs. "Let us not pretend this was an innocent clerical error. We have monitored Earth's cultural transmissions. Their dominant political rhetoric increasingly favors species-first policies. This representative Reynolds campaigned explicitly on prioritizing human interests above galactic stability." Reynolds didn't bother waiting to be recognized before speaking, another breach of protocol that sent ripples of disapproval through the chamber. "I find it interesting," he said, leaning forward with that practiced, charismatic smile, "that when humans try to claim the same rights other species have enjoyed for millennia, we're accused of destabilizing the galaxy. The Tholians expanded their mining operations in the Cygnus sector last cycle without this level of scrutiny. The Viridians have maintained trade monopolies on 26 essential pharmaceutical compounds. Yet humanity seeking equal footing is somehow a crisis." I winced at his tone, but I couldn't deny a small swell of vindication. Reynolds was a diplomatic wrecking ball, but he wasn't entirely wrong. The Order had always operated with an unspoken hierarchy, where the founding species enjoyed privileges that newer members could only dream of. The Xanthi delegation, which had been silent until now, activated their communication arrays. The Xanthi were one of the few species who'd consistently supported human integration into galactic society. "Perhaps," their harmonized voice suggested, "this situation offers an opportunity for reflection." The autonomy assertion protocol exists within our legal framework because the founders recognized that development classifications could become tools of control rather than protection. If humans feel constrained by their designation, should we not consider whether our system still serves its intended purpose? This sent the chamber into chaos. Some delegations signaled outrage, others interest. The neural interface hummed with emotional data too complex for human minds to fully process. I noticed something unexpected happening in the lower tiers of the chamber. The representatives from the Draken Collective, a species that had evolved on a high-gravity world into something resembling armored centaurs, were engaged in intense communication with the delegates from the Nomad Flotilla, a coalition of species who lived their entire lives on massive generation ships. This was unprecedented. The Drakens and Nomads had been locked in a cold war over resource rights for over a century, yet here they were, finding common ground in the face of human disruption. Similar realignments were happening throughout the chamber. Traditional power blocks were dissolving as species reassessed their positions based not on historical alliances, but on how they viewed humanity's challenge to the established order. 2 weeks after that initial council session, I was summoned to a meeting with the Quarry ambassador. The Quarry were silicon-based crystalline entities who communicated primarily through light patterns and regarded most organic life with something between scientific curiosity and mild disgust. The Quarry embassy was kept at temperatures that would freeze human blood in seconds. I wore a thermal regulation suit that made me look like an old Earth astronaut and tried not to shiver as I was led to the ambassador's chamber. Ambassador Tsirka hung suspended in a gravitational field, facets glittering as it rotated slowly to face me. "Cultural Liaison Marshal," it said through a translator. "I have been authorized to speak with you regarding the human situation." "I appreciate that, Ambassador. There's been a lot of misinformation. We have analyzed 7,419 of Representative Reynolds' public statements prior to his appointment." Tsirka interrupted. "We have also reviewed human political trends over the past 30 Earth years. Our conclusion is that his actions are not anomalous, but representative of a significant faction of human thought." I sighed. "That's not entirely inaccurate. But most humans still value our place in the galactic community, and this is not a criticism," Tsirka said. "It's crystalline body pulsing with blue light. It is an observation that has led to a reassessment." That caught me off guard. A reassessment? The Quarry consensus initially opposed human admission to the order. "We believed your species lacked the temperament for cooperative governance. We viewed your rapid technological advancement as concerning when paired with your biological aggression response. And now we recognize that what we perceived as flaws may instead be evolutionary advantages. Humans question systems that other species accept as immutable. You see inefficiencies where we see tradition. This perspective has value." I tried to hide my shock. The Quarry had been among humanity's harshest critics, and now they were suggesting our disruptive nature might be beneficial. "The Quarry consensus has entered discussions with 17 other delegations about forming a new cooperative framework," Tsirka continued. "One that would maintain necessary regulation while allowing for greater species autonomy and innovation. We would like humanity to participate in these discussions." "Does Representative Reynolds know about this?" "We have not approached him directly. His diplomatic methods are counterproductive to nuanced negotiation. We would prefer you serve as intermediary." I left the Quarry embassy with my head spinning. What had begun as a diplomatic disaster was evolving into something far more complex, a fundamental reassessment of the order itself. Reynolds' office on Nexus Station had been transformed into a war room. Holographic displays showed shifting trade patterns, military deployments, and resource flows throughout the galaxy. His team of advisors had expanded to include several alien consultants, species that had historically existed on the margins of the order and saw opportunity in the current chaos. "Jack, perfect timing," Reynolds called out when I entered. "We're mapping potential ally networks. The Drakens reached out this morning. Can you believe it? The Drakens? They've got the heaviest industrial capacity in 3 sectors. I studied his face, trying to discern if he fully understood what he'd set in motion. "Tucker, I just met with the Quarry. They're forming a coalition to create an alternative to the order. They want us involved." Reynolds grinned. "See? This is exactly what I've been saying. The old system was designed to keep emerging species in their place. Break it apart, and suddenly, everyone's eager to make deals that actually benefit all parties. You planned this? I asked incredulously. The documentation error, the invocation of the autonomy protocol, this was deliberate. He shrugged. I'd love to claim I'm that strategic, but no, the specific mechanism was luck. But the goal, disrupting a system that was suffocating human potential? Absolutely. For the first time, I saw Reynolds not just as a bull in a china shop, but as someone who understood something fundamental about humanity's place in the galaxy. We were never going to thrive under the old order's restrictive classifications, our tendency to question, to push boundaries, to demand better deals. The very traits that made us difficult diplomatic partners were also the traits that drove progress. The Archon has called for another emergency session tomorrow, I said. Word is they're going to try to nullify the autonomy assertion on procedural grounds. Reynolds nodded, unsurprised. They'll fail. Too many species have already begun negotiating outside the Order's framework. The genie's out of the bottle. The next day's council session was unlike anything Nexus Station had ever witnessed. The chamber was filled beyond capacity, with some delegations bringing their entire diplomatic corps rather than the usual 2 or 3 representatives. The Archon called for order repeatedly as factions openly debated with each other across the chamber floor, a complete breakdown of the careful, formalized communication protocols that had defined council proceedings for millennia. This assembly must reaffirm the founding principles of the Order, the Archon insisted. We cannot allow a single species administrative error to unravel 12,000 years of peace and stability. The Xanthi representative's voice cut through the chaos. What we are witnessing is not the result of an error, but the inevitable consequence of a system that refused to evolve. The humans have merely accelerated a process that was already underway. The Viridian speaker rose. If we cannot enforce our most basic protocols, then what purpose does this council serve? I moved that Earth's membership be suspended until proper remediation can be implemented. That's when something truly unprecedented happened. The Draken representative, General Thox, stomped one massive limb in the traditional challenge posture of his species. The Draken Collective opposes this motion, he rumbled. Furthermore, we hereby invoke Article 17 of the founding treaty and declare our intention to withdraw from the Galactic Order, effective immediately. The chamber fell silent. We will instead join the newly formed Interstellar Cooperative Alliance, General Thox continued, along with the Nomad Flotilla, the Quarry Consensus, and 23 other sovereign species. One by one, representatives stood, hovered, or otherwise signaled their intention to join this new alliance. They included species that had been bitter enemies, species that had barely acknowledged each other's existence, species that had thrived under the Order, and those that had merely survived. The Archon's physical form actually flickered, the equivalent of a human losing color in their face. You cannot, this is not. There are procedures for withdrawal that must... The procedures, the Nomad representative said softly, were designed to make withdrawal functionally impossible. We have studied them carefully. Like our human colleagues, we have decided that some rules must be broken for progress to occur. I watched as the oldest political entity in known space collapsed, not with weapons fire or grand pronouncements, but with a series of procedural declarations and the quiet exit of delegation after delegation from the council chamber. Reynolds found me in the observation gallery afterward. History in the making, he said, watching the exodus of former council members. Not bad for a real estate developer from Boston, huh? You realize this could still go very badly. I warned. The species who benefited most from the old order aren't just going to accept this. Of course not. There will be conflicts, negotiations, setbacks. But for the first time, humanity will be dealing with other species as equals, not as some upstart civilization that needs to be managed. He clapped me on the shoulder. The next few years won't be easy, Jack, but they'll be honest. No more patronizing developmental classifications. No more being told to wait centuries for privileges other species take for granted. As we watched the chamber empty, I felt a strange mixture of terror and hope. The Galactic Order had been flawed, hierarchical, and resistant to change, but it had also prevented interstellar wars and managed resources across thousands of worlds for 12 millennia. What would replace it? Would this new interstellar cooperative alliance truly be more equitable, or would it simply create new power imbalances? Would humanity's disruptive influence ultimately lead to a better galaxy, or had we simply shattered something imperfect but functional without understanding its value? The answer, as with most significant historical turning points, would only become clear with time. But standing there, watching representatives of ancient civilizations willingly dismantle their own power structures, I felt something I hadn't expected. Pride. Humanity had forced the galaxy to confront its contradictions, to question systems that had calcified into dogma, to imagine something better. Maybe that was our species' true contribution to galactic civilization. Not our technology or our art or our scientific discoveries, but our stubborn, irritating, sometimes reckless insistence that things could always be improved. The day humans broke the galactic order wasn't the end of interstellar cooperation. It was the beginning of something new, something messy and uncertain, and alive with possibility. Just like humanity itself. 25 years later, and I still get asked about it at every diplomatic function I attend. You were there, weren't you, when it all fell apart? They say it with a mixture of awe and curiosity, like they're asking about witnessing a supernova up close. I was there when the 12,000-year-old galactic order collapsed. I watched ancient civilizations scramble to adapt to a new reality that humans had accidentally triggered. But the truth is always more complicated than the legend. Today, I'm returning to Nexus Station for the 25th anniversary commemoration. The station itself has been transformed, no longer just a diplomatic hub, but the central meeting place for the Interstellar Cooperative Alliance. Where once there were rigid protocols and segregated embassy sections, now there's a fluid interchange of ideas, technologies, and cultures. As my shuttle approaches the docking bay, I can see the changes. The architecture has evolved to incorporate design elements from dozens of species. Methane breathers move freely through specialized corridors that run parallel to oxygen zones. Gravity shifts subtly from section to accommodate different physiological needs. My official title these days is Ambassador Marshall, Earth's senior representative to the Alliance. It's been a long journey from cultural liaison to diplomat. But then again, the entire galaxy has been on a journey of reinvention. Tucker Reynolds is waiting for me at the arrival terminal. Despite being in his 70s now, he still has that same energetic presence, that same slightly too perfect smile. Time has mellowed him though, or perhaps it's the weight of what he's set in motion. Jack, right on time, he says, clasping my hand firmly. They've got us scheduled for the main commemorative address in 2 hours. Half the Alliance leadership will be there. And you're sure you want me to speak? I ask as we make our way through the bustling concourse. You're the one they call the Great Disruptor. Reynolds laughs. History has been way too kind to me. I'm a guy who didn't read the fine print and accidentally broke the galaxy. You're the one who helped put it back together. There's some truth to that. After the collapse of the Order, I spent a decade shuttling between species, helping translate not just words but intentions, mediating conflicts, finding common ground. Reynolds had broken the old system, but building the new one required thousands of dedicated individuals from every species working to create something better. Have you seen the new historical exhibit? Reynolds asks, guiding me toward a side corridor. They've recreated the old council chamber. It's eerie how much they got right. The exhibit is housed in what used to be a storage bay. As we enter, holographic projections flicker to life, recreating that fateful day when delegation after delegation walked out on the Archon and the old order died. They even got your smug expression right, I say, nodding toward the projection of Reynolds announcing humanity's continued adherence to the autonomy assertion. I wasn't smug, he protests. I was strategically satisfied. We both laugh. Time has given us the luxury of finding humor in what was then the most terrifying diplomatic crisis in human history. A group of young beings, I recognize species from at least 6 different worlds among them, enters the exhibit. They move as a unit, conversing casually across species barriers in a way that would have been unthinkable under the old order. They're using neural interfaces that translate not just language but cultural context in real-time technology that emerged from the collaborative scientific initiatives the Alliance fostered. One of them, a young human woman, recognizes Reynolds. Her eyes widen. "Excuse me," she says, approaching us tentatively. "Are you actually Tucker Reynolds? The Tucker Reynolds?" He gives her that charismatic smile that helped him upend galactic politics. "Guilty as charged. We're studying the transition era at the Interspecies Academy," she explains. There's so many different perspectives on what happened. Some of our professors say you deliberately exploited the autonomy assertion to break the order. Others claim it was truly accidental. Reynolds exchanges a look with me before answering. The truth is somewhere in between. I wanted to challenge a system I saw as unfair to humanity. The specific mechanism was accidental, but the intent to disrupt was very real. Was it worth it? Asks another student, a Xanthi youth, whose translator renders their harmonics into crisp, academic language. The conflicts that followed, the Viridian trade embargo, the Tholian incursion, was independence from the order worth those costs? It's the question that historians and political theorists have debated for 25 years. It's also the question I've asked myself on countless sleepless nights. Reynolds' smile fades. That's the question, isn't it? I could give you statistics about improved trade volumes or technological advancement rates under the Alliance. I could cite the increased self-determination of formerly restricted species, but the truth is, history doesn't offer simple moral calculations. What my colleague means, I interject, is that revolutions, even bureaucratic ones, have consequences that can't be fully predicted or controlled. The alliance we have today isn't what anyone imagined 25 years ago. It's been shaped by countless decisions made by beings from every member species. The students absorb this with the solemn intensity of youth confronting complexity for the first time. I remember being their age, believing that history was made by clear choices with obvious outcomes. The commemoration ceremony is held in the Great Assembly Hall, a structure that didn't exist when the order fell. Unlike the old council chamber with its rigid hierarchical seating, the assembly hall is designed as a series of interlocking circles with no position inherently higher or more central than others. Representatives from all 79 member species of the Alliance are in attendance. Some are from civilizations that didn't even have contact with the order, newcomers who joined an interstellar community that values diversity of thought rather than conformity to ancient protocols. Reynolds and I take our places at one of the speaking platforms. As the ceremonial tones signal the beginning of the proceedings, I look out at the gathered assembly and reflect on how far we've come. The Archon enters, not as the voice of the dissolved order, but as the representative of its species, equal among others. Our eyes meet across the chamber, and there's a moment of recognition. We both remember the old ways, for better and worse. When it's my turn to speak, I set aside the formal address I'd prepared. 25 years ago, a clerical error changed the course of galactic history, I begin. But the truth is that error only revealed fractures that already existed. The old order maintained peace by enforcing stability, sometimes at the cost of growth and change. What humans brought to the galactic community wasn't just disruption for its own sake, but a reminder that systems must evolve or they will eventually break. I see nods of agreement from some of the older diplomats who remember the rigid hierarchies of the order. The lesson of the past quarter century isn't that humans were right and the order was wrong. The lesson is that diversity, not just of biology but of perspective, is the true strength of any interstellar civilization. Under the Alliance, we've learned that conflict isn't always destructive. Properly channeled, it can be the engine of innovation and growth. I gesture toward a group of Tholian and human scientists who developed the gravity manipulation technology that makes Nexus Station accessible to all species. 25 years ago, the Tholians and humans were on the brink of military conflict. Today, they collaborate on technologies that benefit all Alliance members. This is the real legacy of the day humans broke the galactic order. Not the breaking itself, but what we collectively chose to build in its place. As I continue, I notice Reynolds watching me with an expression I've rarely seen on his face. Humility. He knows, as I do, that his actions set events in motion. But the galaxy we live in today was shaped by billions of beings making choices large and small in the aftermath. When the ceremony concludes, representatives from dozens of worlds mingle freely in a way that would have violated at least 15 protocols under the old order. I watch a Kore crystalline entity engaged in deep discussion with a Vespari hive mind and a human xenobiologist, their very different minds finding common ground. Reynolds joins me at the observation viewport, where Nexus Station's position offers a spectacular view of the nearby nebula. Not bad for a species that only figured out faster than light travel 75 years ago, he says, gazing out at the swirling cosmic gases. We had help, I remind him. We still do. That's the point, isn't it? The old order tried to manage diversity by containing it. categorizing it, controlling it. The Alliance thrives because of diversity. I nod, thinking about how far we've come and how far we still have to go. There are still conflicts, still misunderstandings, still moments when biological imperatives and cultural differences create seemingly insurmountable barriers. But unlike the rigid stability of the Order, the Alliance embraces these challenges as opportunities for growth. We've learned that peace isn't the absence of conflict, but the productive engagement with it. You know what the real irony is, Reynolds says after a moment. If the Order had just approved my status reclassification request instead of getting caught up in their procedural requirements, none of this would have happened. The Order would still be intact, humanity would still be classified as early interstellar, and I'd probably be remembered as a moderately effective Earth representative at best. I laugh. The multiverse is full of alternate timelines where Tucker Reynolds is just a footnote in galactic history. And you prefer this one? He raises an eyebrow. I consider the question seriously, thinking of all the lives lost in the conflicts that followed the Order's collapse, but also of the flourishing interspecies collaborations that would never have emerged under the old system. I do, I finally say, not because it's perfect, but because it's alive. The Order was calcifying. What we have now is messy and challenging and constantly evolving, but it's real. Reynolds nods, satisfied. As we stand there watching distant stars, I think about the legacy we've all created, not just humans, but every species that chose to build something new rather than cling to the familiar. The day humans broke the Galactic Order wasn't an ending, it was a beginning, the first step in a journey that continues with each new generation, each new species that joins our cosmic community, each new challenge that forces us to grow beyond our limitations. That's the truth about revolutions, whether they happen on a single planet or across thousands of star systems. They're not defined by what they tear down, but by what they make possible.